And I get where it's a trap for somebody, but I actually think the bigger trap that people have is that once they become good at something, they feel they can't become good at anything else.
The show today features Walt Edwards. Walt has had an incredibly interesting career because of his unique decision-making, which focuses more on people rather than the job title. If you like the show and would like to show your support, I have a Patreon listed in the description below. Patreon donors get early access to content, special Patreon-only content, and knowledge that I will be donating a portion of the money to charity. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy. I'm joined today by Walt Edwards. Walt, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate being here.
It's been interesting meeting someone who's much more philanthropic with their career. Everyone, for the most part, I've spoken to is more focused on the business aspect of their lives, working for another corporation or something like that. But you were a little bit different. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, that kind of stuff.
I'll try to give you the short version so we don't put people to sleep too quickly. Since my time at Case, I did practice law for a little bit in the state of Michigan, passed the bar and practiced there. I'm happy to, any one of these you can pick up and unpack a little bit further if you want. After that, though, I ended up working in minor league sports for several years. Operating and running and then helping people buy and sell minor league franchises. Also was a player agent for a number of years. Primarily, those were all in hockey. That's the sport I played. So through college and was a sport where my contacts were and enjoyed that. After that and had some interesting experiences. Again, we can unpack wherever you'd like to. Then I had a chance to go work for a training firm that wanted to get into training fundraisers. And specifically had no one who'd been a fundraiser but wanted to be able to help people using some proven methods raise more money. And I thought, what a great thing. And guy wanted me also to sell, and I had sales experience and success in sports. So it worked out pretty well. I stayed there for 8 years, grew the company till it was rather large, and but had a different last name than the owners. And so when I asked for a little piece of that, they said, no, don't think so. And so I went on my own. For the better part of 8 years, and had a small private, kind of like a niche practice, and it was good. But then you quickly realize some of the challenges around that. I got a call one day after doing a project at UT Austin. I got a call from the vice president there, said, "Would you want to come down and run my talent development shop?" He actually called it talent management. I purposely changed the phrase to talent development, just thinking my sports days. I don't like to manage talent. That's just moving pieces around on a board. I like to develop talent so people can grow into new positions, ones we don't even know are there, or if they leave to get something better. I did that for 5 years and just over 5 years. And then in August of this year, that's just about to end, I accepted a position as the president of Graham-Pelton, which is a nonprofit consulting firm. And so I get to remain in Austin, Texas, live down here. We've been here since we moved here for UT, and I get to stay. Part of the nice outcomes, if you will, the silver linings of the changes in the work dynamics over the last few years. So that's in a short snippet me, unless we go into my family life and my animals. So
that's a great summary, and I appreciate you giving us a nice overview of the things that you've done. Why don't we start at the beginning then? Why did you add the JD and the MBA together? What was your decision for that?
Well, part of it was about probably 7th or 8th grade. I told my mom and dad I wanted to be a judge. So that meant I was predestined to go to law school. I don't know why I said it. I don't remember saying it, but I do remember as I was in college, I went to Colby College up in Waterville, Maine. I played hockey there and went to school there. And I got interested in healthcare administration in particular as work. And my parents all worked in healthcare. And so I kind of liked the idea of getting an MBA. And my parents said, well, no, you're supposed to get a law degree because remember you wanted to be a judge. And I liked the idea of going to law school too. I'm not sure why. I had some friends, family friends that were attorneys. And so look for programs that you could do both, whether they were formal joint programs or not. We looked for places that would offer both. Case wasn't a place that had a formal program, but said they would work with you to make it happen as quickly as they could. And to me, it was really, I'd made a commitment to do law school. And then during my first year of law school said, well, if I can get in, I'll go get my MBA at the same time. And retook the GMAT, scored high enough. They let me in, worked out transfer credit, but it really gave me a different perspective. I mean, it was such a neat thing to see that. And in one time, I remember one particular moment in time where we were studying the same case in land use control and in a franchise marketing class over in the business school, the exact same case.
Hmm.
And it was the same time. And the different perspective you'd bring from one to the other was great. And it really was helpful. So much so that people would say, well, see, there's the attorney slowing everything down again. When you talked about, well, what's the land permitted? You got cleanup. It was an old gas station. And then you got at the law school, people saying, all you business people care about are profits. Well, isn't that kind of what it's supposed to be? It's a business. And it was fun to see the two different perspectives. So I liked adding it. I thought it gave me more flexibility, made me a little bit more attractive as a candidate into wider areas. And I suppose that's probably about it.
So the one question I like to ask everyone, at least for this season, is what do you think that the MBA gave you uniquely, and what do you think the law degree gave you uniquely?
The law degree, I'll answer that one first. The law degree gave me a completely different way to think about issues and how I would approach solutions. And it allows you to think more than just do. And I think that's an important part, right? Before, even, I like everybody else did a variety of things in law school and coming out, but it just makes you think a little bit differently. And I value that even today, that before you just do something, you analyze the situation. What's the issue? What are the possible things that impact it? And people could say that's the same thing you do at business school, but business school, it's usually predetermined to a solution you're looking for, unless you're doing a little bit of entrepreneurship. But then you're trying to think of whatever could solve a problem. That's a little bit similar, but I think business school gave me an appreciation for how the world moves at a different pace than perhaps the legal world does, but how the two interact was really I think the benefit of having them. It just brought different perspectives to it. And I think that's a really valuable thing.
Oh, absolutely. Having the business perspective when I'm in my law job, it lets me figure out how to approach a problem in a more meaningful way. Because some things, lawyers, people always joke lawyers they went to law school because they couldn't do math or they don't like business. And, seeing the business perspective of how a lot of I was just in an in-house corporate position, seeing the business perspective of how they do the things that they do, it allowed me to provide a different kind of value to the business that I think people without the MBA probably wouldn't be able to provide. So after you've graduated now, you became a judge, right? Or maybe not?
No, I didn't. I probably would never be able to pass scrutiny to be a judge. I don't know. No, I went to work for a big firm. Am I right to say the name of the firm? Is that okay with you?
I don't mind.
Okay. So I went to work for a big firm out of law school. I clerked for a firm, Summer Associated. So I was a summer associate in a firm in Vermont, in Burlington. It's a great firm, has a different name now, but that was a great experience. Then because the program took me 4 years to go through, my third year, I clerked for a firm in Michigan called Miller, Canfield, Paddock and Stone. And we'd had some family friends that were in different offices of theirs. And I took an offer from them coming out to go work in Grand Rapids. And I was Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I was at the end, I was right in 1990. So I was at the very end of firms hiring big groups of associates, and right at the beginning of firms firing a bunch of almost whole classes, right? So we had, I want to say it's like 8, maybe, I can't remember the exact number, but like 8 people in our class. And you could say within 3 years, all but 2 of them were, maybe 1 were still there. But it wasn't a good experience for me. I mean, some of the people were great, some of them weren't. There was a challenging time in getting associates to get work. And I brought some of my own clients in from the guys who I was representing as an agent in my last year of school. And they wanted to take that away and have somebody else do it because I was not a partner. Candidly, I probably didn't appreciate what the practice of law really entailed coming out, even though I'd worked a little bit here and there in the summer. I didn't quite understand some of the things. And so I have to tell you, some of them, it was my fault. I dropped it. I just didn't do the job I should have done. Other times there were other dynamics that, they wanted you to work in one area and I had expressed an interest in a different area. It was hard to find litigators in 1990. Everyone wanted to be, you came out of different movies and different TV shows that were popular and you all wanted to be corporate attorneys. And they put me in a couple times. I didn't say put me in, coach, I'm ready to play. They said we need someone to go, just ask for a continuance. And of course they knew what was going to happen. I didn't. And so much so Josh, I gotta tell you, one time I won my argument. I didn't even know, because I asked for continuance and the judge said no. I didn't even know I'd won. I just made the argument that I had studied for a little bit, prepared for. Went back and the partner said, well, what happened? I said, well, they found for this. Well, congratulations. I said, why? We lost. He said, no, that was your client. That was your side. I was so naive in that whole world. I didn't understand. But it just wasn't a good experience for me. And again, some good people, some not so good people. And I decided to leave it was a mutual understanding. They kind of wanted me to leave and I kind of wanted to leave. I'm not going to say that, they were desperate to keep me, or nor was I desperate to stay, but it was a nice mutual understanding.
If you want to, you don't need to. I would love to hear about that experience, because I know we spoke about it, what the leaving experience was like for you. Because I think it's an important one that people don't usually talk about, and it probably should.
Well, I have to, and I can't always remember what I tell people before. I always say to people, if I can remember something, I'm not sure I can repeat it the exact same way again 5 minutes later, but I'll do my best. In one person in particular, but it was, part of it was there was not enough work to go around, right? The partners were having trouble getting their work, so there wasn't enough to give to us. But I remember one person in particular, there was not a lot of development of new associates, right? You were just there and you were given the work, and if you figured it out, great. You swam in this pool with cement shoes, and if you didn't, you drowned. But one in particular came in and it made it a point to, I mean, just not a very nice guy, came in and said, well, I understand you're leaving. Well, you really weren't going to amount. You really couldn't cut it here. You weren't made for this. I'm surprised that you lasted. I mean, this was not very nice, and I'm trying to be kind to him, but he said some things along those lines, and he was one of the worst offenders. Like, he was never really supportive, never tried to help you, just was a guy who yelled and screamed, but billed a lot, right? So where that means, where he lands in the firm hierarchy. And, and eventually that caught up with him. But at that moment in time, I just decided, I said, look, I'm not, in my mind, I'm not an idiot, right? I graduated, I passed the bar. And so I decided, and I won't use his name because that wouldn't be fair, but I did say, I said, you see that plaque up on the wall there? And he said, yeah, what about it? I said, well, I'll just tell you this. See, that plaque tells me at that time, at that moment, people in the country, across the country, said I was the very best at what I did. And I'll say, Josh, what it was. So, it was I was selected a first team All-American in hockey that year. So my coach couldn't vote for me. All the other coaches picked me to be the best goalie in college hockey at our level, Division II, Division III college hockey in the country. I had no idea. I was on the 7th place team. And just, I got hit a lot. That was my job. And I love playing, but that was a great surprise. But they said, you are the very best. And so I told them, I said, you see that? That's what it means. When you're that good at anything, you can come talk to me like this. But for right now, you can just get out of my office. And because, this was a person who he hadn't been supportive, hadn't tried to help, hadn't tried to develop. All he wanted to do was just pummel you. And, to me, I'd had enough. I was not an idiot. I'd made some mistakes. I mean, there's some things I just didn't do right. I understand. And I was willing to stand up and accept those. Also, no one ever told me what to do. You had to figure it out. I didn't figure it out the right way sometimes. And, but that was just not called for. That shouldn't have been tolerated. And I just had enough. And I have to tell you, it felt really good, because he didn't know what to say. He was just like, you can get out. You just, on. Because I was very blessed and fortunate to have that award. So, is that the one you were thinking of? Because I can't remember. Is it?
It was. And the reason I think that, besides the fact that you had the confidence and self-assuredness to say that, but it was also, if I remember correctly, you didn't have a job lined up right after you quit this one.
No, you're exactly right. I didn't. I had nothing lined up. I had a handful of clients in sports. These were all guys playing in minor league sports, except for one guy. It was not enough to make a living off of, but I didn't want to be there. They didn't really want me, and I didn't want them. But that wasn't what was going to define me as a success or not. So no, I had no play. It wasn't like I had the soft landing spot. I had none. I didn't have a parachute to float down on. I just hoped it was a high building I was jumping off of, which is a terrible thing to say. I hope it was a long way before I crashed, because I wasn't quite sure where I was going, but I knew it wasn't going to stay there, and I knew that wasn't for me.
Yeah. And that's awesome that you were able to figure that out so early on in your career. So after you left this job, what came next?
I had a short stint, and I say short, like maybe a year and a half or so, a couple of years, with a sole practitioner. in a small town in Michigan, who my dad, who was a chaplain, met in the hospital after he'd had a heart attack. And he was a great guy. And he tried to, had a great small town practice focused on, small typical things, small real estate deals, bankruptcies, some criminal defense work, but all misdemeanors, no felonies. He did some divorce work, had a great office manager. She could sniff out the good ones, and the big problems, just conveniently, sorry, we're not going to, she was really good at. But here's a guy who I respected, was trying to get out of the industry because he didn't like the integrity of people that he had to deal with the way it had been 20 years before. So why am I beating my head trying to get into this business? The people I respected were the people who were all trying to get out, not just him, but other people and partners at the firm who were saying, this is not the same way it used to be. You could shake hands, and, you had a deal, just not long before he and I had this conversation. He shook hands at a county courthouse. By the time he got back to his office, the guy had just done the opposite, filed a motion, and, went against what he had promised to do on a handshake. He said, that's the integrity you get from a lot of people. Not everybody, but a lot. I said, this is not for me. I didn't enjoy what I'd been doing. This is not what I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing. And so at that point in time, I took a big jump, and again, had no place to go except for a handful of clients, and had made some contacts and said, I'm going to try to line up with one of the bigger player agents in the business, and scrambled for a few years and had a few lean years. But he had a good stable of clients, guy I ended up connecting with, aligning with, did pretty well. I won't say great, until I had someone call me about, and we help people buy and sell teams. So we help move some teams around in different places, everywhere from the NHL down to, alphabet soup farm leagues. And one of them called me and asked me if I wanted to run a team. And I said, well, let me think. It's in Florida. It's warm. And yes, I have to think past that. So
you were only in law for really a hot second there, was less than 5 years.
Yeah, less than 5. Easily less than 5. Might even be about 4-ish.
Wow.
But when you see people, and again, I don't want to throw any one place on the bus. It wasn't just unique to me. I know a lot of people had it. I got in a little bit of trouble one time when I was at the firm, when they brought new summer associates in, and they were telling about the great work-life balance it had, and we don't worry about hours. And I literally laughed out loud and kind of scoffed. I made a noise, and I got in trouble. I said, because that's not the way it is here. That's not my life. I heard that same thing a year ago, and it's not my life here. And that creates a challenge. And the pressure on billable hours. It's not that you don't mind working hard, right? You just want to have a chance to succeed. But I did want to. I wanted to be in an environment that if it was one where I had to sink or swim on what I figured out, the practice of law in a lot of these areas wasn't probably where I was going to do it without someone to guide me and mentor me. And that just didn't exist a lot. Or maybe I wasn't the star that they wanted to attract. But in hockey, I could. I'd played it. I knew people. I knew the game, and I kind of knew I had some pathways to make some things work. So if you have to rely on yourself, you're going to go to a place where you have some strength but can still grow.
Yeah, and hockey is a little bit off the beaten path. I don't remember taking any hockey classes at the MBA school about how to run a hockey business. So you went in there and you ran a hockey company. What was that? What was that like?
Well, it's like running any other business. You just have to figure out, and this is where my MBA came in so handy, right? I had a legal background. I could handle a lot of contracts, or other issues came up like player contracts and stuff. But most of those are every league. They're almost all handled by league offices. So they're all standard contracts. That was helpful to find out where loopholes were, to be able to, what wasn't included and what wasn't unallowed, shall I say, to be able to pay guys, because you had to work your way around salary caps in every league. And so you just had to be creative. But from running a team operationally, it's like any other business. Where are my revenue streams? What are my big cost centers? How do I manage them? And what drives my revenue? And so in hockey, it was really simple. It was your biggest revenues, tickets, and your second biggest revenues, corporate sponsorship. Then you have your merchandise. In some buildings now, not very many back then, you got some of the concession revenue, which everyone thinks is where you make your money, and it can be. But most of the buildings for hockey teams, the hockey teams didn't get concession revenue. So you only had those 3 streams: your tickets, merchandise, and sponsorships. Tickets by far being, and once you know that, you kind of figure it out. Okay, then what are my cost centers? Salaries, insurance, rent, and then you kind of figure out what you can manage. But the biggest one is asking your owner a simple question: do you want to win or do you want to make money? because a lot of guys buy these as, the great joke is, how do you make a small fortune in minor league hockey? Start with a big one. And, but they can make money. I mean, they really can. And you just have to know how to do it, but it doesn't mean you're going to win championships. You'll be competitive and you'll win at home most of the time, but you're not necessarily going to win championships. And so you have to ask your owner, what's the priority? Because I can tell you a number of championship teams that were not in business the next year, but boy, they won the cup once. But I can also show you teams that have been around a long time, may have won one, but they've been around a long time because they are profits and they make money. And they're built to make money.
Was the difference between the ones that stuck around and the ones that didn't just that they had a more focus on, driving ticket sales, sponsorships, et cetera?
Yeah. And they didn't overspend to try to get that one player, that one coach, or overspend to make, like where you housed your players, how you travel. I knew a couple teams that traveled all the time by private jet. I mean, that's how bad it was. One weekend we had a 2-game series. Whoever got more points out of these 2 games, so the home and home, they won the division. And last 2 games of the season in my building, we put in 10,000 plus. I think we won the game, and so we were up by 1 point. But we went after the game. My guys are climbing on a charter bus, right, to drive 7 hours to go to play the same team tomorrow night in their building. Those guys, and they made sure every one of my guys knew it all night long. They're climbing on a private jet, and they'll be home in about an hour and a half. And so my guys, they hate, but that team, they made a lot of money, but they weren't around a long time. That's the difference. Is that you build your model for sustainability, but you can be competitive, and depending on how lax the league is around the rules, you have a chance of winning. And in junior hockey, the team actually did it. I was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa for 5 years. Team won a national championship in juniors. We ran it like a pro team, just didn't have to pay players, which is the best of everything.
And you said this was the team that was in Florida, or was this Iowa?
The one in Iowa was a junior team. One in Florida was a minor pro team, about like a AA baseball, be like the AA level of hockey. Now it's still AA now. That league.
Yeah. So. No, I just wanted to make sure. And so how long were you in that area, the semi-pro or the AA baseball equivalent?
I probably did that for about 5. No, I spent 3 years there. So before I got to juniors, it was probably about 5. So about probably 9 years.
Oh, wow. That was a good amount of time.
I think because I had one of the things someone had said is you need some staying, you need to stay with the team, because my niche was finding broken teams and helping them make money, like turning them around or starting teams. So I'm trying to think, I've been doing that for about 3 years, and then went to Cedar Rapids, and I was there for 4, got fired. I'm happy to tell you, but I got fired, then got rehired, and then finished out that year, but it had lost its luster by then, right? I mean, it just kind of lost its zip for me. So,
well, now I want to know about the fire rehire.
Yeah. So the best guy I ever worked for in sports was a guy who owned Cedar Rapids. He owned lumber companies up in Wisconsin. Great guy. Sold the team, and the guy who bought it was a sports marketing, you can't see my air quotes, guru, and had all the answers. And so we played to about 96% capacity for 3 years. And then it dropped to about 90 in year 4, still making money, doing really well. Sold the team, guy who bought it, this guru comes in and changes everything. Like, we ran it like a business. He wanted to run it like a hockey team. And so the hockey people had all the last decisions, and which means everything's going to cost more. Everything's about winning. And changed the colors, logo, marketing approach, everything. And attendance just plummeted. Mm. I did what I was told, and I would share that this is not the way we've been successful. And he changed everything. And then he fired me in January, which is great. When you're getting fired, when a guy comes and you're in your office and he's come to change the locks, and you're the general manager and you don't know it.
Oh, that's bad.
And I said, what's going on? He said, well, I'm here to change the locks. And he said, I go, why? He said, well, that usually means change is coming. I said, well, let me introduce you. I'm Change. And then another guy comes running in from the owners who'd come down from Minnesota. And said, well, Walt, we're going to make a change. He said, I said, well, we got a game in like an hour. Who's going to run the game? So I ran one last game, did the best job in sports, shoots a t-shirt gun. But then come to find out, about 8 months later, he was indicted for fraud and embezzlement.
Oh, God.
Because he had forged signatures on personal guarantees and stolen money to buy that team and a few others. And I mean, it was indicted and convicted and went to prison. So
Oof.
I'm not telling stories out of school. It's a federal record. And then the guy who bought it hired some people who struggled to be able to make connections locally and sell stuff. And so asked me if I wanted to come back. And I came back and it had just lost a little bit. It just had lost a little bit of the luster and shine. And maybe I was getting a little old or my knees didn't like running around a rink anymore or something. And so that's when I began to look at, I don't know what comes next, but I'm looking for something. And I knew before that season was over, I wasn't going to stay. And I told him, so I was looking, I didn't know. I came up, I actually I'd asked a building manager about the person who ran the building in town, a different building. I asked them about a job and they said, no, but let me put you in touch with this person. I called that person about the job and they said, yeah, I don't think that really is for you, but I have this other one. It's with a training company that wants to train people and universities and for fundraising. Would you have any interest? I just needed a job, right? So I met the guy. I had 2 offers from him and then one from a trucking company. And this guy said, look, you went to a workshop, you see what we do. I want to build $1 million company. Can you do that? Well, yeah. Again, I just needed a job. And I liked it. I thought it was a good product. And my brother was a doctor. My dad's a minister. My mom worked in healthcare administration. They all help people. If I can help people raise money, seemed like a good way to give, to make a living, but also do a lot more because of a ripple effect. I help people raise money. They help give scholarships or research. Seemed like a pretty good deal. That was the job I took, was with them for 8 years and then left, went on my own.
So the raising money, was that, how did you end up liking that compared to what you were doing before? Obviously you said you just needed a job that was kind of different.
So what we did is we would go in and train fundraisers at universities and at hospitals, not as much in general nonprofits. So think more like, so I did 3 different workshops at Case Western Reserve during my time with the company. But you go in and you train fundraisers, you train deans, you train physicians, which is really the niche I developed a lot, was working with physicians on how to engage grateful patients and families. So you would help the organization raise money. We would not raise it for them. We would help them raise money. And so for me, it allowed me to develop a skill that really helped my legal background helping, because you learn how to think on your feet in law school. So you have to think on your feet when you're presenting over and over and over again to a room full of really smart people, literally brain surgeons. They're all smarter than I am, but you have to develop, your content. You have to develop the ability to expand it at a moment's notice, how to pivot. And then the company grew and did really well, but I wanted to go a different direction. I liked more the coaching aspect of it than just doing large sessions, but it let me sell stuff too. I mean, I sold 2/3 of what we sold and delivered 2/3 of what we delivered, and had a lot of weeks on the road, like about 45 plus weeks a year. You'd spend most of it on the road.
Wow.
And just kind of had enough of that.
Yeah, that's definitely a bit too much for me. I mean, good for you for finding your peace with it when you were doing it. And I want to talk about the coaching, but really quickly before we do, I'm curious, what are the biggest pieces of advice for people who raise money, who fundraise, and what's the biggest mistake that people make when fundraising?
Boy, now this can get me in a lot of trouble, or I might hit the magic moment and then I can retire. So you'll have to tell me which one it is. I think there's a lot of different things people can do. If I have to look on it, I think one of the biggest mistakes people do is it's a combination of 1 + 1 trying to equal 4, and it doesn't equal 1. They come in with a focus on what they need and don't ask the donor what they want to do. In other words, but the way you do that, you uncover big gifts come from significant moments in life, and you have to be willing to go at those and explore them authentically, not with a slant toward what my organization does and what I need money for. And so donor fatigue is caused so much by people asking donors for what they need rather than what the donor may want to do, and how do you make that connection? And that's why donors get tired. They feel like a checkbook. All you ever ask me is what you need. How about what I might want to do? So I think that's the biggest mistake, is they go in based on what they want to do rather than taking the time to find out what the donor wants to do. I think the biggest thing they can do is become, if I had to tell you they don't spend enough time listening, working on listening, and they spend more time thinking about what they're going to say.
Yes, generally I agree with that. I think and I don't think either of those answers get you in trouble. Now, granted, I'm not in the fundraiser world, but it does. They both sound like good pieces of advice. So you're moving into coaching now. You found an interesting niche that kind of is following through your jobs. You do the hockey thing, you're running a team. I'm sure there's some level of personal development in that position. You just coming out of this other job, and now you're moving into coaching. What is that?
So the coaching piece it evolved out of the training that I had been doing with this company, and where the opportunity came was to work with people, and particularly physicians, some deans, but a lot of physicians, and I'd say 85% were academic physicians and researchers who were trying to figure out, how do we raise money and how do I engage people? And the best prospects are those that have had the closest personal experience, and they're called grateful patients. But the belief was, well, you want me to ask my patients for money? No, it's not at all what I want you to do. Once you remove that, they'll say, well, then what do I do? And of course, there's no class in med school on how to engage grateful patients. And what everybody else wanted to do was have it's what I had done, right? You had a big workshop, 30, 40 people, tell them all what to do. No one was answering the question, how do I do it? And I love going into markets where there's no competition. I'm really good when I'm the only one in the entire market. And there was nobody else who wanted to spend an hour with a physician saying, how do you do this? And understanding the personality of that doc, the service, the specialty area, it changes from specialty area to specialty area. And I didn't get it right up front. I mean, I would do okay, maybe a couple times meh, as my son likes to say. And I had a great breakthrough moment at Dana-Farber, was one of my clients, and it was a client repeatedly. And I went in, and this woman wanted a second round of coaching. And I said, great, I'm all set. I got more slides. I can't wait. And I'm banging away through my slides. And it was a gift officer, and I can remember her name. And she stopped me and she said, Walt, how about we see what she brought and we work on that? I said, oh, Rebecca, that's a great idea. And it changed everything. It changed absolutely everything about how I coached physicians, which was helping them figure out, how do they do what they need to be able to do? How do you meet them where they are, which is, first you have to find out where they are. That's asking questions and listening. And then how do you envision a path to get them to where you'd like them to be, or at least further down that path in a way that helps them take ownership of that, rather than just say, here's what you're not doing, you have to do this. And they're going to say, hey, I'm the doctor. No, I don't have to do that. And and that's where the coaching part for me really came in, because, for years I had coached in hockey, and I'd coached guys who were a lot better than I was. I had guys who played in NHL, and I could sit there and say, you have to do this and this, but what you actually had to do was figure out what was preventing them from being able to do what they needed to do, and finding a way based on their unique abilities to get where they were, and in the way they played. Same thing with a doc. What's preventing you from doing this? Is it ethics? You think it's unethical? Is it feels icky? Which I had someone say once. Is it, I don't think it's my job, or I don't know who the good prospects are. I don't know what to say. All those things could be a blend of them. Once you identify those, then you don't say, well, here's what you do. You then coach them through that process to find a way to navigate them to a point that they can, I use the phrase, they can reduce the discomfort enough to engage, not promise to make them comfortable. Just reduce the discomfort, because the focus, you shift the perspective. The perspective's not about them, it's about the patient and family.
Right.
And all of this just took time and practice, and figuring it out as I kind of went and thought about experiences and had some real breakthroughs. And it was something I developed. It probably took me about 7 years to continue to hone and develop. Still am, I would say, be honest.
Finding your purpose is hard, but it doesn't have to be. Unlock your full potential with Circle Key Coaching, led by Jane Bergman. Jane specializes in working with innovators and improvers, providing the personalized support they need to find their place. Jane helps clients avoid common mistakes to reach their career goals faster. By focusing on strengths and empowering clients to make better decisions, Jane helps individuals advance faster in their careers with joy and satisfaction. Don't let the status quo hold you back. Transform your career with Circle Key Coaching and Jane Bergman today by reaching out to janelynbergman@gmail.com. It's interesting to see, and I don't know if you've noticed this in your own path or not. It's all of the major decisions that we've kind of talked about have dealt with people and how they understand the problems that they're faced with. It's about it seems to be a lot of the tracing line through everything. It seems to be focused on their emotions, how to get them where they need to be in order to do something that is mutually beneficial, whether it be them coming back for more coaching or for them going and raising money. And I think that's interesting that you've built a person-focused career path. Because I don't even know how I would conceptualize that if I were to try to teach that to someone.
Yeah, I almost think the next job I got helped me do that. After that, I spent 5 years as the assistant vice president for talent development at UT Austin. It's all about people. It's all about talent, right? And how do you find the pathway? And so the challenge people have, like the buzzwords right now, career pathways and professional development, of which a subset is training. Yeah, but there's a couple things that most people weren't doing up front, which is asking someone, so what do you want to do? What is it you like? What are the components of a job that you like? And how do we figure out what those components are? And then what are the possibilities that have those components in them? You like working with numbers, you don't like working with a big team, you like having something directly connected to well, let's figure out what areas allow that to happen. You don't want to travel, you don't want to ask for money, probably not going to be a frontline gift officer. Pretty easy to figure out. But that actually forced me to do that. And the number one thing of helping people down that path is all the people that I got to coach were people who wanted to be coached, which is the number one thing you have to ask. Because I had tried to coach people who didn't want to be coached. That's about as much fun as going to the dentist who doesn't have any Novocaine to put in your mouth or the happy gas, whatever your choice may be. It's not a fun experience. And so nobody gets any benefit out of it. But if people want to have a career path conversation, first thing they have to do is they have to step in and tell me what that is. And I find that what you have to do is have people be aware of who you are and where you are and what you can offer them. And my coaching style does not fit everybody. And I'm also able to say, I'm probably not the best person for you. And, my style is a little bit different. Here's the way I approach things. And it's funny, that will open more doors than it closes. Because you'll find people think, well, that's kind of what I want. That's not what you told me. Help me understand. And you ask more questions. And I have found that the more questions I ask, the far better the experience is going to be. And it is. I mean, I think it's all around helping people identify what they're trying to accomplish. Even in sports, what's this player want to accomplish? What does this owner want to accomplish? As in fundraising, what does the organization want to accomplish? The people within it, your role, what do you want to accomplish? I have deans who, you coach and they're not quite sure what their vision for their college or their school is. And I just don't want to, really what they're saying is, I don't want to be the one who screws it up and has things go backwards because I've only got 3-4 years to do this in my rotation or 5 years I sit here. Some people are there 20 years and it's day by day administration rather than what's down there about 10 years and how do we get to that?
Interesting.
So I wandered around a lot there. I know I went all over the place. Sorry.
No, it's great. That's good conversation. And it's interesting that you said that it's not for everyone, because from what I'm hearing, you developed a quasi-Socratic method that focuses on introspection in a conversation, right? And to me, that sounds like something everybody can do and everyone would benefit from. What were some of those challenging people who didn't like the method that you were doing? What was that like?
Some people, I think I can think of sometimes where I wasn't the right person for them.
Okay.
There has to be someone that you're willing to look at because that takes a great deal of vulnerability. And even in times where you have shared vulnerability, which I believe is not just a great technique, which it is, but it's also something that I think is what makes conversations beneficial to both sides. Like
Right.
I get a good conversation, a good coaching conversation, I get as much out of as I put into because I'm willing to be vulnerable as well. But just because I am doesn't mean the other person still has to accept you. So there are times you have to accept I'm just not going to be the right person for this to help coach this person. I think other times there are insecurities that you have to find a reason why they're there. And sometimes you can break them down and sometimes you can't. The insecurities that people, I mean, last time I checked, there aren't many physicians who like to be perceived as not knowing more than most people in their field. I get that. I'm not here to tell you how to do your surgery, but if I come in with too much arrogance to say, you do the brain surgery, I'll do the fundraising. Well, no, they think they're pretty good at it too, or they're not. You have to find out what's creating that block. And sometimes the personality just doesn't match. Other times people are not willing to, they're not willing to give up that sense of self-perception. They don't want people to see them in that state of vulnerability, which is why I found a lot of the best breakthroughs, and it actually was reinforced by a white paper out of Hopkins. A guy named Steve Rum did it with some folks out at Hopkins. The coaching was actually best when done as a group, then followed up individually because that allowed, here's what to do, then here's how to do it, is how I put that model together. But you have to be willing to say, I've got room to grow. And if someone doesn't believe they have room to grow, my approach isn't going to work. And it's not some method you pull off the internet that says, here's a grow model of coaching. I don't have it doesn't fit a template. And if it does, that's great. I don't know which one it is, but I learned a phrase, and it actually comes from a hockey coaching seminar I went to, of all things. The guy defined, and there was not a whole lot else in this seminar that was great or even good. They got the term fun sponge. That was great, because that's what my kids call me sometimes. You're the fun sponge, Dad. But the other one was how you define coach. And so here's the quick story, and that is, he said, when you think of this thing that has horses and it has this wooden structure with wheels, and Wells Fargo used to take people across the Western Plains, and what was it? It's a stagecoach. And when you used to ride, before they called them buses, do you know what they called them?
What do they call them?
Motor coach.
Ah.
And before you flew economy, before it was relabeled economy, it used to be called coach. It was coach class and first class. And so what coach really meant was not a person, but it was a journey that someone wanted to take from where they were to where they wanted to be. The coach was the vehicle that took them from where they were to where they wanted to be safely, or as safely as possible, which means you have to create that definition. Really helped for me understand what I wanted to do as a coach. You have to find out where they are authentically, right? And realistically, not just where they think they are, because that's not usually where they are. What's the gap? How do I fill that to where we want to try to get to? And there may not even be complete agreement on where we're trying to get to, but it can't be where we are. And it has to be a desire to want to move in that direction. And that's the essence of what I think coaching is. But if you don't think you need to be coached, you don't need me to get you from where you are to where you want to be, because you think you can do it all by yourself. I just usually ask, how's that working for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason you're there in the first place, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've had just some fun stories where people, this is making me really uncomfortable. I just don't want to do this. I understand, but your department chair wants me to coach you. Yeah, I just don't think I need this. I said, well, your style of, how much money have you raised? And there was this pause. I said, well, I know, it's because it's zero. So that's not working too well. So we have to do something different.
Zero is not great.
Yeah.
for someone whose job it is to raise money.
Part of their job was, in her role, that was part of what she was supposed to do. And not to be, she was not a gift officer, not have to ask for it, but she'd been part of nothing, made no referrals, nothing. And she felt she just didn't need to be coached in this area. Well, let me tell you why I think you need to be. Up to you now. And
right.
I've got 30, I'd be happy to take the 30 minutes back and not have to run across campus to my next one. My knees would like that a lot better. But
your career path of being more people problem solving focused, do you think that comes from more of you as an individual, or what part of that comes from your education in the JDMBA?
So I think the blend of the two, for me, allow you to see beyond the problem that is the text to the people that are part of that problem. One of the things I find in law school always brings is, most if you think of your first year classes, for me, I can remember them vividly, the three traditional classes, not our writing or research class, but contracts, crim law, and torts. That was our first three. All of those are disputes between people, right? They're all people. Yeah, there's laws and statutes and others, but there's people at the core of them. So you actually, what you do, and then I worked as a mediator for the city prosecutor in Cleveland for about 9 months. People problems, right? So you have to, I think so many legal problems, they're just people problems. Do I think you have to be the best, is it a people skill? I think you can learn people skills. I think you can learn all these other skills. I think that what business school brought was an ability to say, it can't just be about people. Sometimes it actually has to be about business. It has to be about money. It just can't be, I hope everybody feels good, right? You have to be, it helped me get to the point where there's a reason sometimes things don't work, from a business standpoint or ideas or what have you. I'd like to say it's a little bit of my personality. I think a lot of people, I think it doesn't have to be the match for mine. I come from, my brother's a doc, a retired ER trauma doc. My dad, before he passed, was a minister for a bunch of years. My mom, we always say that she's, the nicest person on the planet. So maybe I have a little bit of that, but I think most people do if you're willing to utilize it. But I think, law school gave me an idea about how do you work between two people to solve the problem that happens. And business school says, sometimes it's aligning everybody to get to a common solution and a common opportunity. And both of those are working with people.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you were wondering, but that's kind of how it comes to me.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. If that's how it comes to you, then that's how it makes sense, right? Because obviously you're the one who did it. Now I want to turn toward Graham-Pelton and your experience there, because that's your most recent job. I think that came right after your coaching job. Was that right?
It came after my time at UT. So I was part of my time at UT. My gig, as I call it, is I was allowed to keep a small part of my personal practice as a consultant on the outside, primarily in academic medicine, not all of it, but primarily in that space, while I still served in my role as the AVP at UT Austin. And that was all up front, all done. But it grew out of that I had a couple people I knew working at Graham-Pelton. I started to do some stuff with them, and they had a leadership change and had about a 6-month hole without a president, CEO. And I'd kind of reached a point where I was ready to do something else outside of the job I had at UT. It was good. I wasn't asked to leave. The VP there was a friend, and I just, what he needed for that department to go bigger, which was, by the way, that was our values, bigger, formed around that word. When I put the team together, he said, "Your name's not on here." I said, "Because I don't think I'm the best person to take you where you want to go in this role. I actually think there are people who will serve you better. I came here to do this with you." And he said, "Yeah, I know. We didn't get to do as much of that. And you asked me to commit to this, and I did. But if you want this to truly get to the next step, I could sit here and collect a paycheck and keep my job. But this person's probably better suited to go where you want to go." And that means I had to figure out what is it for me. And it was going back into the consulting world. That led to a conversation to run a healthcare team at Graham-Pelton, which 2 weeks after that came back. He said, "Don't freak out. We're excited to what you can do there, but would you be interested in running the place?" And offered me the chance to be president. The other one had resigned early in 2022. And I looked, and my belief is, like the job at UT Austin, I felt very called in my life and in the way I live, that was where I was supposed to be. And I felt the same about this position.
What about this position gave you that feeling?
One, it was one that someone had brought to my attention. Did I want that role like 3 months ago? And I said, "No, I'm not going to go beat my head against that door. I don't feel like that's where I'm supposed to be right now. If that door opens, then that tells me that in my life, that's faith. That's God opening a door for me that I'm supposed to walk through." I wasn't pursuing a job in higher ed. I wasn't looking for one when I got the call at UT Austin, but I felt in my life, I felt very much right that moment that I don't say no. And when this came, it was the same thing, where here's an opportunity to take a role as a real specialist in the work that I do with faculty and physicians. And I now have also 5 years of talent development experience that I can use. But as a president, you're going to be looking at different things. You're not just selling and doing and selling and doing and selling and doing. You're actually running the company and watching it. And it was all about growth. And how do we grow this company? And it brought an entire new set of skills that are much more from my MBA than they are from my law degree, and allow me to see things that are familiar, different, but a whole new challenge. But it also opens up an entire new door of possibilities that when you run one company, suddenly, again, it's like going back to hockey. You just have to understand where the revenues come from, where are your big costs, and what are you trying to do? What's the goal of the person who owns the company? And to me, it opens up a whole bunch of new career paths down the road if I have to go. And I can't tell you why I felt that, except that I just believe that that's what I was being told by again, for me, it's my faith in God this is what you're supposed to do. And when I tell people I could hear that voice as clear as I can hear yours, Josh, I can tell you with complete authenticity, that's how it is to me.
Yeah.
But other people don't, it's different for other people, and I accept that. I get that. That's why this one felt different.
And that's a wonderful feeling. I mean, I can only imagine at that level, and especially at that point in your life too, that feeling must have been very uplifting for you. And it's one I've really only scratched the surface of with doing stuff like this podcast. There was just one of those days, kind of similar to you, where I just felt I need to go and do this, and it just feels good.
I think one of the things that stops a lot of people, I remember, and I think I told you, when I was one of the hockey stops I had, I think this one was in Louisiana, and I was, hockey hotbed that people think of it as. Actually, had a lot of teams at one time. But I'm there, I'm speaking to a bar association. I think it was in Voles Parish. Can't imagine. But, I get up there and I'm an attorney. These are all a bunch of attorneys in there. And I said, yeah, so how'd you get out of the legal field? Like, how'd you escape practicing law? And that's how they put it, not me. And I said, well, I got the magic formula right here. Step one, get your pens out, ready. Step one, take big pay cut. And I say that only because I actually believe that most people, sometimes it's the money, which is where early in my career, by getting out early, I didn't get attached to it. And I get where it's a trap for somebody, but I actually think the bigger trap that people have is that once they become good at something, they feel they can't become good at anything else. When I left sports, I mean, how many times it is you're in these markets like Louisiana or Texas, or like you're a hockey guy. There aren't many jobs for people who run hockey teams, right? Unless you're going to another team and you know what that gig's about. So you have to think of something else. Well, the number one thing is you think I'm good at this, but am I really good at anything else? And feeling unequipped, I'll make that jump, I think is what stops most people from exploring what else might be out there. When, if I can remember my third and fourth year at law school, because the third year was my group that I started with, and they were all leaving, getting ready. All of them were looking, no one ever said, I'm going to go do this one thing that's really different, right? It was all, what firm, what department, what government agency. Fourth year was the same thing, right? People looking at those things. My roommate, the 1 year was another JDMBA. He was in the, I'm not sure if he finished one of them though. I think he did, but it was different. He was on a little different timetable than I was. But I mean, he was working consulting at one of the big accounting firms, rather, and that's what he did. And that was his path. But in business school, no one ever thought of trying to get the really weird jobs. It's a little bit different now, right? There's more people looking at entrepreneurs and startups, but that was barely a thing back in 1990. And I think it's because people feel unequipped. Like I don't know that area, and this is where that feeling you just described. It starts with a belief. My wife told me this, and it is, God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. If this is where you're supposed to go, then he'll help you figure out how to do it. But if you feel, Walt, if you always stopped where you wanted to go based on whether you think you can do the job now, and you only will do things that you're comfortable at, you got a pretty limited area. Like the best you get's lateral. Yeah. It's never forward. I think that's actually what stops a lot of people who are in typical situations. Like I had friends practicing law. What comes next? I'm in a bank. What comes next? They forget about the skills that got them there as opposed to the skill they use on a daily basis.
I think I was particularly lucky because I had a couple of experiences right before I had a manic 7-hour session of learning how to edit a podcast, because I had actually been sitting in my pilot episode for like 9 months. And it was because of that exact feeling that you just described, not feeling like I had enough. And it wasn't until I had a couple of odd experiences. One, my girlfriend was in a car accident and I had to go to the ER, and I saw her in her neck brace, and she said her hands and her feet were not feeling, she couldn't feel much in them. And so that was terrifying. And she's fine now, to be clear, everything's fine. And that was terrifying to me, that I could lose something so valuable to me in a day. And then the other one was, I met an Uber driver. He was a year older than me, and he said he was making $80,000 a month. And he gave me enough detail to where I believed him, because I questioned him. We spoke in the car for 2 hours after he arrived at my apartment to drop me off. He did some Amazon warehousing in Europe. he was kind of like a super drop shipper in that sense. And so he's making all this money. And I was talking to him like, dang, this guy is sad. This guy has no purpose or sense of himself, and he has all this money in the world. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm afraid of starting a podcast because I don't have the skills, because maybe I want to make money or something like that, or some other reason or something like that. Like, those are bad reasons. Happiness is something that I had to create and find on my own. I had to go and equip myself, as it were. Right. And it's I really resonate with that point you made. And I know we're coming up on time for you. So I want to be mindful of your time.
I have a few extra minutes, just so you know. My
Okay.
calendar's there.
Okay, cool.
The advantage of between the holidays. So
yes, that's true. Yeah, in between New Year's and Christmas is always a quiet time for me too. That idea, though, I think you're absolutely right, especially these days. There's so much information out there, and you see in social media, right? You see people, oh, I did this, and I was just born with it somehow. That's not how it goes.
yeah, and I had a person at UT when I was trying to. They would say, well, I don't have any leadership opportunities. No one reports to me, no direct reports. I said, well, they're different, right? Leadership and management are different skills. Coaching is yet a different skill on top of that. Mentoring is a different skill. Sometimes they blur together, but you have to build each one. But if you don't have leadership opportunities here, then go find some. Like, what are you involved in other places? Like, some of my best leadership experiences come coaching youth hockey. I said, so what are you involved in? A year and a half later, that same person turns around and in a big Zoom screen says, well, Walt, you told me the only way I could get leadership experience here is if I went and coached youth hockey. No. I said, that's how I got it. One of the ways, but I did not say that's what you should do. I said, you should find the equivalent in your life. And so I think sometimes people are looking for the path that is the one that they think and the one that they imagine. And I beat my head on that. That's why I kept going from team to team to team to team, because I kept thinking, I'm going to find the team where I'm going to spend my career and I'm going to be in this sport. And I loved hockey. I mean, it was just what I loved. I played it. I got to work in it. And then the most fun I had fun playing, but the most fun I had and the most powerful emotional moment in all of hockey I've ever had was watching my son play his very first game as a goalie. And I was on the bench because in Iowa, right, if you've played, you're automatically a coach, because there weren't a lot of people at the time. And he's a goalie. He's never played before. And all I kept saying, Josh, was, please don't get shelled. Please don't get shelled. I just didn't, but I was never more nervous. Never, and some of my most powerful learning experiences were as a coach in youth hockey, not just on his team, on other teams, but and some of my biggest learning lessons, the things that I didn't do well, were from things outside of my job. But then all of a sudden, it's like I told people, I can take the 4 lessons I learned playing, the 4 years I played college hockey, and the lessons I learned in those, not just 4, lots of them, but 4 years, and the things that happened in those 4 years, and I can tell you how they have shaped huge moments in my life, from getting into law school when I was originally waitlisted, by the way, at Case. But I showed up one day. I just showed up. I said, I'd like to have a meeting with somebody who could show me the school. Out of the blue, no appointment, nothing. And the person asked me, why should I take a chance on you? Why you? There's a bunch of people waitlisted. Why should I take a chance on you? Hockey gave me the confidence for that answer. I was the last, I was going to get cut as a freshman, except I got hurt that day and the coach felt bad. I was one of 3 freshmen. The other 2 bombed out when they played, and he had no one left to play. And a third-party goalie coach who ended up coaching in the National Hockey League said, you should play Walt. He's not that good in practice. I didn't realize. I thought I was. I tried. He said, play him. Well, and the end of the story I gave you earlier in our conversation where I ended up. I said, all I need is a chance. I never look good on paper. All I need is a chance, and I can promise I won't let you down. Well, then, unbeknownst to me, I'll tell you part 2 of that story, which she said, I appreciate that. Let me ask you a question. Do you know this person? And she gave me a name. I said, no, I don't know who that is. Well, she called us shortly after the school, shortly after the school year over, she called and said, we should let you in. And I said, well, I don't understand. Why would she call you? She said, well, if you're not sure, walk across campus and you'll see their family name on 2 or 3 buildings. Now, this person went to the church that I went to once in a while in Waterville, Maine, where my dad knew the minister. They were, right? I never talked to really hardly anybody. I sat in the same spot almost all the time. I didn't go every Sunday either. Like I'd go after home games. At road games, I'd get back at 2 or 3 in the morning. I was too tired. Not a good excuse, but just what. But the last Sunday I was there before I graduated, I got up and I said, thank you for letting me people have this spot away from home that felt like home, because my dad was a minister in church, big part of my family, so on. That's all I said. And I didn't stay afterwards and meet people. Right? I just did my thing and left. She said that moment is what she remembered. And that's the kind of person that her school and the one that their families are connected with should have.
Mm.
And she said, well, you don't know. I said, I couldn't pick her out of a crowd of one. I don't know who it is. Huh. And that's where it stopped, right? Just stopped right there. A week later, I got an acceptance letter. And she said, because you came and told me why I should believe in you and why these things happened. It wasn't like somebody's family knew somebody and you're hoping that, an influential alum or trustee, or you don't even know who it is. To this day, I can't remember the person's name. I couldn't tell you. But, I think a lot of times people, they underestimate the value of stepping in to saying, just give me a chance. And I'll share one other thing. I do a session, if you will, I call them, but it's a coaching session. When I call it mapping and trappings of past success. Use your past success to map how you were successful. What were the things that you did? And then what are the equivalent things that you need to do now to bring you success in what you're facing? The trap is, don't start where you ended the last one. You have to start back at the beginning. It's like people who run a marathon, then 5 years later they haven't run, they want to go back. Where do they start? In their mind, they start training where they ended the last one, not where they started the first one.
Yeah.
And then the other trap is realizing that the things you had to do might be different. You might have to build new skills, not just use the old ones. I used to be a great skater, highly flexible, not so much anymore, and I can't do those things. So what are the skills I need to develop? But I bet I can build a map of how I got to be good and successful at something. And I can use that as a way to develop a map and a path to go forward. A lot of people they don't do that. They're stuck at where they are and think only what they do rather than the map it creates.
Oh yeah. Getting stuck that's the big enemy for me right now, is figuring out ways to avoid that. Because getting stuck is something, it's very hard to even know that you are stuck until you've been somewhere for like 10 years and you've been doing the same exact thing and it just has not worked the entire time. For me, that's why I do this kind of stuff, because this stuff, I meet new people, I get to have new experiences, and you can't pay for these kinds of experiences. If I were to have walked up to you on the street and said, hey, Walt, my name's Josh, come talk to me for an hour and a half, it's a very different approach than sending it. So I'm an alum, I want to learn, and that kind of thing. It gives me that sense of change that I think is helping me remain unstuck, or freeing me from that. So I think it's been a great conversation. And if I can, I want to pin you to say, what's one piece of advice you have for younger people who are young professionals or young graduate students?
People say, if you work in something you're passionate about, it's never a job. It's always a job, right? Because a job is what you do. It's the function, right? It's hard to describe it. I don't believe that necessarily, but it sure feels a lot different when you enjoy what you do. I would tell you that I think you'll be surprised if you'll find something that you do enjoy, that's important to you, and find a way to be involved in it. The wealth you get from it is far beyond what you can measure. It will also, if you're willing to go in paths beyond what you can imagine, don't say no to the things that aren't the things that you have thought of. So when you think of career paths and you think of the things that this is my career path and that's what I want to do. When something comes that's not on that path, it's not of your creation, don't automatically say no. Right? It doesn't mean you switch jobs and quit and go, but consider them, because that's where the things that are beyond your ability to imagine are coming from. If you're open to those, boy, there's the opportunities to do things are so much more prevalent than if you stick to your chosen career pathway because you think you know what you want, and that's the only way to get it, is to drive straight ahead. I got no trouble going straight ahead. Just sometimes if you look to your left and look to your right, you're going to see something that you didn't put there, but somebody else was told to put it there for you. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's awesome. I could really do that. I couldn't. How do I imagine even doing it? But take the time to go find out. That, to me, I think if I had to tell someone to do one thing, and always be humble. But people ask, what do you look for when you hire people? Look for two things: hunger and humility. More people who are hungry to grow and hungry, sell and would grow. Comfort is we all like comfortable chairs, but we all know we can't stay in them. And what do you get done when you're sitting in it? Not much, except a good nap, which is a good thing. But in humility, I will tell you that I've had some really good success in my time. Everything from playing hockey to running teams. I had some amazing people that none of that would have happened had it not been for them. Great defensemen and teammates in hockey. Our success, and I had great people playing hockey on teams I ran, working with me in the front office. I had an amazing ticket sales guy in Cedar Rapids. He's just dynamite and he'll be successful whatever he does. I had, I had a great team of colleagues at the training company I went to. I had great colleagues here at UT, and I have some amazing people I work with now at Graham-Pelton. You've got to be humble to not have to be in the spotlight all the time. If it's all about you, boy, it's a pretty small light that gets to shine.
Sage advice. Walt, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great conversation.
Josh, I appreciate it. I hope it was helpful. I really appreciate the chance to get to talk about me, and I get to talk. Two of my favorite things. Sounds bad, but that's my personality. I enjoy talking, so I appreciate the chance to share and hope there's something in there someone finds helpful.
That's the same. I have the same goal. Thanks a lot, Walt.
All right, take care.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Finding Purpose. We want to give a special shout out to our Patreon subscribers for their ongoing support. If you enjoyed this episode, you can connect with any of our guests on LinkedIn to continue the conversation. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@FindingPurposePodcast, where you'll find full episodes as well as some interesting clips from each episode. If you're interested in sponsorship opportunities, please reach out to us at findingpurposepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time on Finding Purpose.